Says we're live. I like to go check it on Facebook. I can't hear myself. Let me turn my mic up a little bit and let me go to Facebook and make sure. Yep, sounds pretty good over there. So we are live. It's of, by, and for the people. Conversations that are centered around the American experiment and headlines. We are back on track. Matthew and I had a couple of great conversations last week. Kali Fontanilla joined us. If you don't know who she is, we had a special edition last Tuesday night. Fresh off her visit on Dr. Phil, Fox News, former school teacher. You can go find that on both of, by, and for the people. And during the break, I shared them on both. Great conversation about good faith, having good faith conversations that Matthew and I had last week, and some other things, critical thinking versus critical theory. But Eric's back, which means we're going to have a big conversation today, and then hopefully we'll be back on for our constitutional deep dive tomorrow. And at the rate we're going, it's not going to take as much longer, 2 or 3 years to get through the Constitution and Bill of Rights. And then we're going to spend 10 years after that because it'll probably all be changed by then. All right, so there's that. It's brought to you by our friends at Eric Buchanan. Let's bring Eric up. He's been traveling the world. 3, 2, 1. Hey, Eric, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, Clint, how are you? Good to see you.
Good seeing you. What part of the world have you been traveling to? The
Not,
exotic parts of the world.
not traveling the world. I went family beach vacation to South Carolina for a few days, and then I went to the American Trial Lawyers, now known as the American Association for Justice, summer convention in our nation's original capital, Philadelphia.
Stop.
So,
Back up. Back up. Back up. I don't
yep.
ever do this. I don't ever stop your introduction. What's the name of the new instead of the trial? So what's the name of the
They
new?
used to be called the Association of
Right.
Trial Lawyers of America,
Right.
and now they are the American Association for Justice.
That feels like a Marvels, like there's like superheroes, like you're standing on your hips in front of the the headquarters. That's
Yeah,
what it feels like.
there's a whole thing about that. I
Yeah.
mean, what's the organization called that all the doctors belong to, that lobbies so that doctors get paid their full money from Medicare and Medicaid and other government programs,
I
and the
don't know.
government doesn't screw them over?
I don't know. I don't have a
The
clue.
American Medical Association.
Oh, there we go.
It's not the American Doctors Association. It's not the We
Yeah,
Work to
yeah, yeah.
Protect Doctors. It's the American Medical Association. So they sound like they're pro medicine. What they really are is pro doctor.
Right, right.
And so
So you're pro justice.
we're pro justice. We're
I
pro
like
civil
that.
justice. Yep.
Let's see. I
That's
just summed it up. Tell everybody who you are. We'll bring Matthew up, and we're going to start off today just giving everybody a tease. If you like country music, or if you don't like country music, we're going to be talking a little bit of country music and then some other topics.
Yeah, we got a couple good topics, 2 or 3 good topics today. So, hi everybody. My name is Eric Buchanan. I'm a disability insurance attorney in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I have people all over the United States who have been denied disability insurance benefits. If somebody has a long-term disability policy, private disability policy, a policy that's covered by ERISA through work, that's what we help people with. So, any kind of insurance related to disability. We also help with life insurance, health insurance, long-term care insurance. We help people all over the United States, working with local attorneys where we need to. And we can be found on the World Wide Web at buchanandisability.com. If you have a disability insurance policy, life insurance, health insurance, or long-term care policy, or a family member does, and the insurance company's giving you the runaround, not paying your benefits, give us a call, 877-634-2506, or check us out on the World Wide Web again at buchanandisability.com. Very quickly, my background is that I was in the Navy for 5 years as an aviator, flying P-3s at the end of the Cold War. And then in law school, I paid a special attention to constitutional law at Washington and Lee. And then I've been practicing in the disability insurance or disability benefits field, getting close to 25 years, 26 years now. But I like working the Constitution into conversations, understanding the history of the United States, and understanding sort of the political history and constitutional law history of the United States is sort of my niche.
All right, let's bring up Matthew Durham. He's going to come tell us who he is in 3, 2, 1. Matthew Durham, what's up, buddy?
I'm having a full morning, but I'm having a good time. How are you guys?
Well, I don't know what a full morning means, but I hope it means good.
Yeah. I'm feeling pretty productive today. So,
Oh, good. Before you tell everybody who you are, I don't normally hijack these moments. I hijacked a little bit with Eric, but from you, wasn't having that Kali Fontenay on, wasn't that that was a really good conversation. I had a lot of positive feedback from her being on with us. I don't know how you felt about it, but I really felt it's good to hear things from people that are, 3,000 miles away. Like we're not just in this Southern bubble. So
yeah, absolutely. I apologize if my dogs are going nuts at the moment, but I
Yeah,
think
we
they
hate
heard
dogs
something
on this
outside.
podcast. We're anti-dog on the podcast, dude.
Yeah.
So, and we'll talk to you about after we're done.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it was good seeing or hearing directly from someone who has seen how a lot of the stuff is taught in California,
Mm-hmm.
who has had a backdoor into being able to see the curriculum as it is posted, and who has been able to talk to teachers directly herself as a
Mm-hmm.
teacher,
Yeah.
and what she's doing about it. I think that's coming up with um, her own remote schooling option
Yeah.
for other folks is a really fascinating, and she does it with she's on thinkexodus.org.
Yep. She's
So
done some videos for Prager, and she's
yep,
just really getting involved. All right, tell her about who you are, what you do, and then I'm going to pull up our first topic on screen like a
sure,
professional.
I'll make it quick.
Oh, we're good. We're good.
So, hi, folks. My name is Matthew Durham. I'm a research project manager at the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga, where I oversee a study on looking at how people's faith and worldview changes over time. It's a 20 plus year ongoing study comparing American and German participants. Um, UTC is also where I received my master's degree in psychology, my undergraduate degree in philosophy. Before all of that, I worked for about 8 years in cancer research on 250 different research studies, all different types of cancer. And I am also a suburban homesteader these days.
There we go. How's it? And you're doing good. You send us pictures of your crops, which I like. I don't know who came up with this topic first, but it should not be a very long conversation. Whenever Jeff Styles and I agree on a cultural issue, which he and I do about 50% of the time, he and I agree much more than people would expect. On my other podcast, Jeff Styles, talk radio legend for 30 years in this area, uh, just a great following. But we agree on this. At least my opinion. Try that in a small town. Eric, was this your topic or was this Matthew's?
I think it was mine, and I think it's pretty just a simple, straightforward, short topic to talk about. We are in the middle of a culture war, and when one side makes a good point that their side thinks is a great point to make, the other side's going to claim that it's racist, bigoted, horrible, not helping. And I'm seeing all kinds of criticism. So the short story is, if you're not familiar with this already, Jason Aldean, a country singer that, frankly, I'm a country music fan, and I'm just haven't followed him very much.
I like him. Yeah.
I'd heard of him, but I didn't listen to his music very much. I've uh, a video. He has a video out and a song. Try that in a small town, and essentially the theme of the song is in big cities where there's carjackings and there's a lot of violence going on the streets and crime is getting out of control. You might be able to get away with that in the big cities, but don't come do that in a small town, because the good old boys here are going to stop you from doing that. We support the police, and we don't want a lot of crime in our small towns. And the video happens to have, purposely, I'm sure, a fair amount of video from some of the violence from the summer of 2020. Now, I've watched it, and it looks like the violence that's shown is a reasonably broad-based representation of different types of violence, showing Antifa people doing stuff, protesters that got out of hand and turned violent, other acts of random violence. It does not. Well, let me. One of the criticisms of this is that it's racist. Now, when I watched the video, I didn't see necessarily that it was only showing black people or mostly showing black people. And so one of my first reactions to this was, if you're against crime and don't want crime in your small town, and somebody else says, well, that's a racist attitude, the person saying that's a racist attitude is building into their assumptions that it's the black people committing all the crimes, which sounds
Right.
pretty racist to me. And one of the questions I think that's fairly raised by the topic of this video is it racist just to be against crime? Is that a is that a fair accusation, that if you say we need to have more police taking care of crime and we need to support the police and we like to have the small town attitude of that crime's not okay here, uh, how is that racist, or is that racist? But that's one of the main accusations against Jason Aldean. literally one of the accusations from NPR is try that in a small town ignites controversy this week over claims that the song in the new video promotes white supremacy and violence. That it promotes violence, I think, is the opposite of what the song does, because it's against people doing violent and criminal things, and then somehow it also promotes white supremacy. I guess if you're a true anti-racist and you think that anything that is normal civilized behavior is an attitude of whiteness, like the African American Museum put up in their poster in 2020 that basically said things like showing up for work on time, using the scientific method, all the normal things that we agree on in Western civilization, that those are signs of whiteness, then maybe that if you have the attitude that it's better to follow the law and not commit crime, that is whiteness. That certainly seems to me to be a pretty far left radical attitude that I would consider in itself to be pretty racist, because you're basically saying that that black people are the ones that commit all the crimes. I don't think that's true. I don't think it should be true. I don't think we should assume that. But if you're the one criticizing this video as being racist, that's built into your assumptions.
Matthew?
Yeah, I one of the other critiques or perhaps justifications used for saying that this is a sort of vaguely hidden white supremacist song is that part of the video was shot in front of a courthouse in which there was a lynching. That's also in an NPR article. And there was one other piece too that they said.
I think there was a New York Times also reported that, and I kind of glanced over that and didn't get the full point. Is there any evidence that Jason Aldean knew that there had been a lynching in that small town?
Right. It was the site of race riots in 1946 and a lynching in 1927 of a black man. I have not seen any evidence to that effect, that Jason Aldean both knew those two pieces of information and, is sort of wink, wink, nudge, nudge, communicating based upon that information to the people who listen to the song. It's that reasoning strikes me as very similar to the 42-ton boulder that was removed from the University of Wisconsin-Madison back in 2021, I want to say, because the boulder had in 1925 in a state journal article been referred to with the N-word as part of its as a nickname. So a boulder apparently is evoking white supremacy because someone called it a racial epithet or used a racial nickname in 1925. It's like you really have to bend the limits of logic, frankly, to somehow make this racist. But as Clint and I talked about last week, that's the whole point of the critical theory tradition, is to find it. As Robin DiAngelo says, it's never a question of whether or not racism was present, but how did racism influence this, or how was racism involved in this situation? So if you're always committed to the notion that racism is underlying everything, you just have to find a way to somehow, jury rig it in, jerry rig it in, and that's what's going on here, I think.
Yeah, I want to. This is, to me, is one of those mind trick things. If I'm in and I've done this in a room, and I stole it from somebody else 20 years ago. But if I'm in a room of 100 people and I'm talking about sales, and I tell everybody, the mind is a very powerful thing. We actually see what we look for. And I said, if I told everybody, all right, everybody, look around the room and find all the things that are red. Write them down. All the things that are red. Red, red, red. You got 60 seconds. Go. There's going to be a long list of red. And then I'm going to tell everybody, now, everybody look at me, and I want everybody to raise their hand and tell me what's blue. What did you see that's blue? I'll have hardly any hands go up because no one was looking for blue. No one. They see what they look for, what they're told to look for. So unfortunately, it's one side of this narrative has told us how racist we are forever. And we have been a racist country. Evils have been done 100%. More than one thing can be true at the same time. However, if you want to find a place in the United States, there were thousands of lynchings. This is the we are so racist. Then tell me where we can go to shoot a video where it is devoid of historical racism or historical bullying or misogynist or patriarchy, whatever you call the oppression. Where can we go to shoot a video unless you again can prove it was done deliberately? So what they do is they zoom out. Well, he shot a video where there was a lynching. Well, he didn't know about that. If there's proof of it, it comes out, then it's a different conversation. He's trying to make a statement maybe we can disagree with. My point on that is, though, they just zoom out. Well, how about the state of Tennessee, or how about the state of Georgia? Could you shoot it anywhere in Georgia? Because at some point in time, there was a lot of bad shit done to good people without their consent in the state of Georgia. So we probably shouldn't shoot videos of, well, how about in the South? No. Well, how about in the United States? No. Here's the problem with that thinking. How about the world? Where are you going to shoot a video that is devoid of evil shit being done unless you can prove it was done on purpose? The other thing it does, two things it does, it's going down the Joe Biden thing. If you don't vote for me, you ain't black. It is the racist thing to say all crime when you show that video is about black people. Second of all, if you don't like the violence, don't do the violence, whatever color you are. And then my last point is, I think they're missing out. I got a lot of friends. There's a lot of black people live in small communities. And you take that violence to their community, they'll stand right beside their white neighbor with their shotgun too, and they'll defend their police officers and their grocery stores and mom and them's place on the corner. I know them. I've hung out with them. I've been to their homes. And if you take it to their small town, they're not going to be mad at you because you're white, black, Hispanic, purple, green, tall, short, fat, gay, not gay. They're going to be mad that you're trying to burn down their town, and they're going to stand in the middle of the road, and you're going to have a problem with them. That's my take on this whole song. It's a total horse shit. Horse shit. And I'm ready for, and again, I'm open to being wrong too. If proof comes out, there's emails. He's like, hey, let's go find a place where there was a lynching. Then all of a sudden, I'll have a different take on it. But right now, what I know, this is a stirred up thing by the media, and they should be ashamed of themselves. I'm going to take a sip of coffee. I don't know if you know this, but me and Styles just had it out for about 5 minutes on my podcast, so I'm ready. Y'all bring the bear. I got the gun.
Now, you two agreed on this, right? That's what you
on
were
this
saying?
one, but he and I got into it about the new curriculum, in African American studies in Florida. That half the people are saying it's trying to say that you soften up the evils of slavery, and the other half are saying we're just trying to say that they were resilient and being able to take a horrible, evil situation and after the fact pull some stuff from that to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, kind of thing. And I'm just like, man, it's funny because we said you can't talk about a movie unless you've seen it. We were talking about the Barbie movie, and I went and saw Sound of Freedom. He went and saw Oppenheimer. But when we talk about the curriculum, everybody can have an opinion about it without looking at it. That's what I asked him. I'm like, how can we not talk about a damn movie, but we can talk about curriculum? That's going to be way more in depth and nuanced than a Barbie movie. God, anyway. All right, I've digressed. Anything else on this stupid topic? Or can we move on, Eric Buchanan, now that you're back?
It's number one on a couple different charts, but it's been pulled from CMT. The culture war continues, ladies and gentlemen.
I had people who did grow up in small towns send this to me and say, this is, I miss this. I miss living in a place where
yes.
Everybody. That has its downsides too, because people can be up in your business when you don't want them being in your business.
Yeah, but tell them get out of your business. Step off, Barbara.
But in a place where your reputation really matters, and you can't just go off and, to use examples from the lyrics, you can't sucker punch somebody on the sidewalk. You can't pull a gun on the owner of the local liquor store. You can't carjack old ladies at red lights without it massively affecting your life in a negative direction. It's easier to do that in a big city where people don't know you, and your reputation is easier to just kind of to not be influenced by this kind of behavior. But they miss that. They really do genuinely miss that now that they live in a place that's not a small town. And so it evokes a lot of those positive feelings of let's get back to a place where your neighborhood matters. That's what I primarily take from the song when I look at the lyrics.
And that's true no matter what color they are. People miss that. again, I when we say small town, I know we all go to rural white folk, but guess what? It is not 1780 anymore. It is not 1800 or 1920 anymore. We got what we wanted, more integration. And guess what? The communities don't look the same. So there are white people and black people and Hispanic people that live side by side. And if you bring that to their little town of 2 red lights, you're going to have an issue. Now, some of those towns are all white. Some of those towns are mostly black, but you're still going to have an issue because that's their neighborhood.
And we're intermarrying at a rate of, I think it's something like 17 to 18%.
You're married, Matthew.
Marriage
Quit
rate.
making a proposal to me, sir. Damn it. It's awkward on camera.
That's what
Right.
happens when you're the good-looking eye candy, Clint. That's just going to keep happening, and you just need to suck it up.
Yeah. You're welcome, people. That's why we got a lot more downloads than we do views. I can tell you that right now. Hey, can we move on to the next topic now?
Sure.
Yeah, please.
Redefinition of woke. Did I get all that? Did I spell that right? I think I did.
Yep.
All right.
I was the one who said that
Let's go,
this is worth talking about. We've shared this before. We've tried to have the conversation where we try to define what do people on the right mean when they say that something is woke. What do people on the left mean that something is woke? There's a meme going around. I'm going to read all 10 points on the meme very quickly, and then I'm suggesting that there's a really deep, good conversation we can have if we kind of break these down one by one. And this is somebody who's pretty clearly left-leaning, I'm going to say, who put 10 symptoms of the woke mind. You read books and don't burn them. You embrace science. You're willing to change your mind when new information becomes available. You understand that most issues are not black and white. You believe in true equality for all people. You like to share. You embrace cooperation. You respect others' rights. You believe culture and the arts have value. You care for the planet and all of its life. Before we go through these one by one, let me just say this. One, that those sound to me like generally what I would consider to be a moderately left-leaning person's traditional values. Those are not the values that when people on the right say that's woke, that people are talking about. So it's an interesting way to attempt to change the definition to say, well, when you call me woke, I take that as a compliment because it means all these good things, and it's missing the point of what the actual conversation about what wokeness actually is when people on the right are saying you've gone too far, that sounds woke. These
Eric,
things sound kind of like normal middle of the road things, but I'd
Can
like
I
to go
can I
down
real
one
quick?
by one.
I need to interrupt you real fast because I want to see if this works. If you don't mind, give me 2 seconds.
Yep.
I'm going to try something. No, hold on a second. I'm trying to make it to where we can. Can you hold on 1 second? Be patient with me. Y'all be
Yeah.
patient.
We lost you, Clint.
There we go.
I can't hear you, Clint. I can hear you, Matthew.
How about now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
See, I can edit that out. Is that okay? Can we put it on the screen like that?
Yeah, I think that's great.
Okay, good. Now
I love this.
Real quick for audio people out there, my platform's upgraded, give me more options to show video. So I've pulled the 10 descriptions up on the screen with us. That's why you heard me be clumsy with it. I will get better at that as I learn these the new upgrades. All right, Eric, now you can talk about it. Thank y'all for letting me do that.
Yeah, that's a great idea, Clint. And I know it takes you a little time to get that stuff, but at least you're pretty.
Thank you.
All right.
Is Clint good looking? He's funny as hell.
Yeah.
All right,
is he talented at moving video around the screen and setting up our podcast? Well, at least he's pretty as well.
He's funny. Go for it, man.
Yeah. All right. So 10 symptoms of the woke mind. We've got the screen for anybody who's watching the video. If you don't, we'll go over these one by one. I read them very quickly. But the point I wanted to start with as we go through each of these is this is a great example of how we are talking past each other. I've tried to in the past either work with Braver Angels, I'm still involved with them, or get some friends together to spend some time trying to talk to each other about understanding each other, and so people on the left and right can communicate better. And it's been a pain. It's hard to get people to have good faith conversations. We do it some, but it's hard to find people that are willing to dig in deep and continue these conversations. And part of what I've seen is over and over again, people talk past each other. So the accusation from the right to the left is that the left, especially some of the more extreme sort of the queer theory people and some of those other people, are pushing teaching in school not just old-fashioned sex ed, but actual transgender issues and other types of sexual behavior, and teaching that to very young children. And an example of that is that in school libraries for fairly young kids, not just older kids in high school, things like graphic novels that actually contain teenagers having sex, and in at least in one case that we are aware of, same-sex teenagers having sex. And is that something you want your third or fourth grader to be able to see? And so when the first point of this is you're woke if you read books and don't burn them. Well, I haven't heard of anybody burning books lately. The fight is over whether or not certain books should be available to certain elementary school kids as opposed to older kids. It used to be I would hear people that were on the more left-leaning side would want to ban Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer because those books contain the N-word, or they want to ban To Kill a Mockingbird because it has a white hero saving a black person. And so does that happen sometimes? I think it does. Do sometimes people on the right say we should take these books out of our school libraries because we don't want little kids seeing them? That is not the same as banning a book and burning them. So the good news I take from this is I think most people, unless you're really on the extreme right or left, most Americans generally would agree with the sentence that we want to read books and not burn them. But it ignores the real conversation of what materials should be available to small children, and how do you handle that? And so when I accuse somebody of being woke, if I'm in that, which I try not to do without just having it as a general conversation, I'm saying what you're trying to do is actually teach kids stuff that's inappropriate for their age, because you're sexualizing children. You're having this kind of conversations with children that are too young, and you're using certain books to do it. We've seen, for example, over and over again, people reading from these books in school board meetings to say, "Are you sure you want to have this with your kids?" And the school board meetings, the school board shuts off their mic or tells them they're not allowed to say it because it's such offensive material. But it's in elementary school libraries. So
Let's let Matthew jump in real quick.
Yeah.
Matthew, tell me about what you think. I'll give you my 2 cents, and we'll move through these a little quicker. But go for it, Matthew.
I mean, there's an entire field, an entire academic field called developmental psychology. That's where you're looking at what kids are capable of doing at various sort of milestones or age, typically associated with age. So the older they are, typically the more they've developed, the more they can handle in terms of complexity and depth. There's that it's a huge field with a lot to it, but that's one of the things that unfortunately has been really disregarded in this conversation, is that there is a deep literature which strongly suggests that kids are not capable of handling conversations about sex acts and sexuality to the degree that many on the extreme left seem to think they are. That lawn boy or genderqueer are not developmentally appropriate for third graders. They're just not. There's not a kid out there for whom these are developmentally appropriate books. So you don't even have to get into the individual parent saying, this is not, I don't want this for my kid. The science TM that so much of the left says they believe in is definitive on this and has been for decades, frankly. So that should have ended the conversation. Unfortunately, queer theory has been and queer theorists have been pushing back against developmental psychology now for decades, and we're seeing the consequence of that, frankly. But that isn't to say that developmental psychology is perfect. I have a lot of criticisms of people in that arena, but it used to be that there was no confusion over this point, and it took the intentional disruption and dismantling of society's norms by queer theory to get people duped into thinking that this was an area of contention, an area of disagreement.
All right, I'll make mine, excuse me, kind of quick. I love the word burn books. I mean, it's again back to Eric. I'm not saying I don't see us burning books. It is, to his point, it's the availability. We as a society have come together and saying, hey, this is what we're going to present to our elementary and junior high and high school students. It doesn't mean parents can't go buy the queer book and give it to their kids if they want to. I don't understand that. It's not been banned. It's just not available in my school library. Guess what? It's also not available in my church library. It's also not available in other libraries. And so I don't understand that concept when we come together of all faiths and religions and viewpoints. And then we all of a sudden say, oh, well, they should be exposed to everything. That's not what the school's there for. It's not there to expose them to every single concept. And the school doesn't have time to teach them every single thing in history, whether it's African American history, white history, American history, whatever history it is, or whatever we have about sexuality. We're supposed to be there to teach them some core basics, and then society, community, family, and life will fill in the gaps. It is not the school's job to do 100% of the education. It's to prepare them to be educated as they move forward. And I will say, it can't be all things to all people. And I will, my last point on this one, and then we'll move forward quicker, is me and Jeff, this is one of the issues Jeff and I had in our conversations earlier. When we were talking about the curriculum in Florida, his response to me was, well, I'm sure Jewish people got something out of the Holocaust, and I'm sure somebody can pull positives, build their life on if they've been gang raped. And I was like, dude, for you to go to the extreme examples of evil to try to say those are the apples versus apples, other than what a school board is sitting down and putting together intentionally. And by the way, in Florida, a number of those school board members, or some of those, are African Americans who have signed off on this. My point on that is these are extreme things, and they're acting like they're laying them down side by side, going, well, this is also that. And it's not burning a book to say a 9-year-old should not talk about how to give good hand jobs or have anal sex with somebody. And if you're uncomfortable hearing that, I had to put a huge warning on the podcast with Kylie, because she actually started saying stuff from some of the books that were available in the schools. And all I could think of is my 14-year-old nephew does not need to hear that in the car with my sister and my brother-in-law, because we've had those conversations. I put a massive warning on that, because it was very uncomfortable. And especially with mixed races there, it was weird. So I digress a little bit on this, but this kind of stuff where they use these extremes or these vague definitions, which I've got a word in each one of these I'm going to pull out. That's my take on number one. My take on the rest of these are going to be about 20 seconds. Eric, you can go through this however you want to, buddy.
Yeah, there's a few other ones I want to dig deeper into, but very, very quickly, you embrace science. I'm glad to hear that people on the left who consider themselves woke embrace science. I think that's one of those things that we can all agree on, that we should embrace science. The problem we've had over the last few years is it became, well, if you don't trust my experts and what my experts say is the science, then you're wrong. And you weren't allowed to have a difference of opinion. And there was a misunderstanding, and maybe it was very purposeful of what science actually is and how it works. You're supposed to have different hypotheses that compete with each other, that you test, that you have the free flow of information, that you do experiments, and you don't trust something to be actually proven until somebody else can repeat the same experiment and get the same results. Those are the kind of things that are supposed to be supporting science. When somebody says I'm woke because I embrace science, to me that doesn't fit the definition of woke. Once again,
Well, what
that
is science to them too?
yeah,
That's just
yeah. So
whatever.
what is science is an interesting question. But if you agree with the scientific method that we should follow science, great, then we are in agreement. If you expect other people to simply follow the experts that you believe in without question, and that means you're following the science, then you're wrong. Just not trusting certain experts without question, that is, I think, leaning toward woke behavior.
Yeah, Matthew, to you, man, it's the whole trust science, and I think number 2 and number 3 are tied into it, because until you're presented with other facts or other science that is also true, they're not. No, I don't see many people willing to change their mind at all when presented with new facts, and a lot of that comes from scientific world, right? It's oh, we just don't agree with that science, and it's so disingenuous to say that I don't embrace science because I don't agree with you without at least having a conversation.
Before you answer, Matthew, just to clarify for anybody who's listening, so number 2 was you embrace science. Number 3 is you are willing to change your mind when new information becomes available.
Thank you, Eric. I'm sorry about that. Yeah.
I think, Clint, you're right to see those two things as directly linked to each other.
Yeah.
If you embrace science as a process of integrating new information and sometimes difficult, conflicting information, when people test things using different methods and different sets of assumptions, then yeah, it should be assumed that you're willing to change your mind when new information becomes available, because that's the whole point of science, of the scientific process. So if that's what they mean, then great. Is that what each individual person means? Well, I'm not confident on that. You see, when I ask people what do you mean by that, and they have maybe one of those yard signs that says "Trust the science" or whatever. Unfortunately, our scientific literacy is less than perhaps ideal in the United States, at least. And a lot of the time, the answer is, well, I pay attention to what the scientists are saying. Well, which scientists are you talking about? Well,
Right.
the ones that are on CNN. Like, okay, fair enough.
Or the ones that are on Fox. I only listen to the
Right.
ones that are on Tucker Carlson's show. If
Are the-
Tucker Carlson hasn't approved them, I'm not going to listen to them.
Are the ones that are standing at the government podium that
Exactly.
lied to us or gave us misinformation for
Right.
for 4 years? Are the experts that said that the bomb was about to drop on Trump Russia? Those experts, the security experts that signed off on, the medical experts that signed off you can go protest and you can't go to church. Which scientists are they agreeing with? I would love to have somebody on this show that believes in this, that can have us push back on that without getting pissed off at us. Because if they can talk to me, I won't get pissed at them if they can prove me wrong or at least make me understand it. All right, Matthew, keep going. I interrupted. Unless we're going to the third one for Eric.
You triggered a thought in me, and I may have someone who's more to the left than I am, but is very scientifically literate, who might be an interesting guest.
Bring them. We'll see if they can match with my Waffle House philosophy. Woo!
This is someone who has listened to our podcasts before,
Listen.
so has a sense for kind of how things go.
I am fueled by the all-star breakfast with scrambled eggs, man. So they better bring their A game.
And this person also happens to live in East Ridge, so fun time.
Now it's a fair fight. Now we're fair fighting it, because I know.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, keep going. Who wants to take number 3? Or are we done with that one?
So you kind of addressed that earlier. I think you're willing to change your mind when new information becomes available, I think, is a shared value that most of us have and should have. And so if somebody on the left is saying, well, I'm woke because I have this philosophy, it makes you a normal person that is a liberal, maybe a progressive, maybe also a conservative or a libertarian. That's what most people should be willing to do. When you hear someone on the far right say you're woke, that it's the exact opposite of that.
Let me ask you this, Eric. You keep up with this, and I told Jeff Stiles this. I'm going to go read the full curriculum that whole, but at least that section that Florida is talking about. And if I'm wrong, if it reads to me like they're trying to soften up the evils of slavery, I'm going to go on Friday with Jeff and say, hey, you know what? That's kind of bullshit. We shouldn't be doing that. I don't like it, but I'm going to be willing to change my mind. There are studies out over the last 5, 10, 15 years that show that conservatives have actually changed their mind more than some liberals on stuff. For instance, same-sex marriage, interracial marriage and dating, abortion. Even at one point in time, it was no across the board, and now it's, well, maybe it's 12 weeks, maybe it's 6 weeks, maybe it's 15 weeks. I don't see much movement in the last 5 years when it comes to the liberal side of thinking. I see much more compromise on the conservative side up until the last year or two. And I think conservatives are like, well, how much rope do we have to give folks before we start holding on?
Yeah, I think that's there's some fairness to that. Part of my criticism of understanding where people who are farther to the left than me are on these issues is I can't get any of my friends who are that much farther left than me to have a regular conversation about this kind of stuff. I can get people on the right to do it all the time, and so I just don't know. When I try to have those conversations and pin people down on where can we agree and disagree and where you come from, they don't want to have the following conversations. They want to have longer conversations. They either start yelling at me,
Right.
or they get upset, or they disappear and don't want to have the conversations.
Eric, I'm gonna let you and Matthew go over the next one. I got to make it. I had a text that is something. That's why I love podcasts. It's got to be dealt with right this second, of the work stuff. But on this, understand the most issues are not black and white. I really want to come. If I get back on in time, I want to talk about that one with you guys. But I'm gonna let y'all talk for just a second. I'll be back in about 60 seconds.
All right, Matthew, let me start on this one, because I think this one's a pretty good example of, yeah, if you're a normal person, you would agree that most issues are not black and white. Jonathan Haidt, the psychologist who wrote the book The Coddling of the American Mind, gives examples of 3 or so big things that have changed in the thinking of young people in America. That the world is divided between good and evil is one of those things that he says that young people have been taught, that there are only black and white, and if you agree with me, you're good. If you disagree with me, you are evil. There is no compromise. You should not listen. So this is clearly one of those things where it's great that most people agree. It's great that that they think they're being woke when they say this, but right out of Jonathan Haidt's book, there's a lot of people who don't agree that most issues are black and white, that they've been taught that issues are very black and white. And what we saw in 2020, I'll give very specific examples of this, was the social media argument over race and racial injustice in America. And we were told, we the people were told, that we can't agree to disagree anymore, that you have to agree with us, otherwise you are racist. If you don't agree with this solution, then you are by definition a racist. Everything is black and white. To me, that's what falls under the category of being woke. That if you are somebody who's a strong anti-racist, believes in the actual philosophy anti-racism, that anything that results in an unequal outcome, or almost anything else that results in something unfair, has a racial component to it, and you have to agree that you have to fight through that from the lens of shattering the structure of the system to get rid of all racism. And if you disagree with that, then you're part of the problem, that you are a racist. That's clearly what the criticism is of people who are regularly thinking people, who are people somewhere in the middle, saying, no, it's not always that clear. There might be other causes, there might be other reasons. Let's look into the facts of each situation. So I'm glad to know that people on the left who consider themselves to be woke are saying, no, not all issues are black and white. Good, we agree on something.
Yeah, I mean, the question is just which issues are black and white, right? Because you could easily apply that same principle to people on the right, many people on the right who see a lot of nuance and don't, and for example, look at racial disparities as not an example of a black and white issue. They might say, why are we assuming that a disparity is immediate and necessary evidence of discrimination? Right? So that's not black and white thinking. That's an attempt to find some nuance there. Whereas if you ask someone who self-identifies as woke, especially if we understand wokeness to in the way that it sort of originally came into the culture as this notion of being aware of injustice, being aware, especially systemic injustice, um, then it's very necessarily tied to the a lot of the ideas that we now see in the form of modern anti-racism. So in that instance, they very much do embrace a black and white view of the world, which is the case that you make here, and I think you're right to. They make the case, like D'Angelo does, that it's never a question of whether racism occurred, but how it manifested. They make the case that you cannot be not racist. You can only be racist or anti-racist. These are very clear binary options coming from a position that tends to be opposed to binaries. So, so yeah, I think that's that statement is kind of a bit of a nothing burger. It only applies when you want it to apply.
Yeah, while Clint's getting back in here, it's the interesting part to me is clearly what we were told when we were starting to read all this stuff about anti-racism was you have to agree or we don't have permission. You can't just agree to disagree anymore. And yet 3 years later, we have people who say, well, I'm woke because I understand most issues are not black and white and that there's gray room in the middle. It The consistent theme throughout all of these is that if you're having to say this is what you believe to cover up what some of the extreme beliefs on the far left are, there's a lot of hope for Americans being able to agree to disagree or reach compromise on a lot of things, because these if these people are saying this is what I stand for, these are kind of reasonable positions that we can get close to each other on. Clint.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in, and I'm not going to guarantee that in about 15 or 20 minutes I may have to step off one more time. I just have a timeline situation. But anyway, my point when I read this one is a couple fold, very quickly. One is it's odd, and y'all may have said this, so apologize, but it's odd that they say that most issues aren't black and white unless if you don't agree with them. Then all of a sudden it becomes a black and white issue. Well, I don't agree that that's how you should do that. Well, then you're a misogynist, you're a racist, you're something else. You don't see the headline the way I see it, then you are this thing. It's either agree with me or the other option is you're wrong or you're this label. The other one I thought of immediately is I think it's ironic when they say that, because how do you govern people without being able to say as a people there are some rights and wrongs, there are some clear blacks and whites. It can be a nuanced conversation on how we as the community will handle the after effects of this. But if you cannot come together as a 340 something million people and go, we're not saying that this is everybody, but here's some standards, some norms, and some boundaries that we can build policies around, all of a sudden you can't govern. To say there are no black and whites in our society is like, well, then how do you put laws in place? How do you put regulations in place? How do you and how do you put all of a sudden policies that can govern the masses, and understanding that the masses are also going to have residue of people that fall out and aren't going to be covered by the policies? I don't understand how you can have a country if you can at least say we can have nuanced conversations, but we have to have some rights, wrongs, boundaries, and norms. That's my takeaway. There we go.
All right, let's keep it moving along,
Yep.
Clinton. I'll hit the next one. So you believe in true equality for all people. So once again, this is playing with those words. If somebody is kind of a normal, not outside of the Overton circle, when we're having the conversation about equality, the question is, do you mean equality of opportunity? Do you mean equality under the law? Or do you mean equality of outcome? That's sort of the regular conversation. And what we started seeing from the left was they started replacing the word equality with equity. And equity tends to be defined, at least in this context, as the equality of outcome. That for something to be equitable, we have to have everybody reach the same outcome. It's basically from each according to their ability, to each according to their needs. It's socialism, it's communism. And where it was applied in the anti-racism context is if black people are not having the same outcome as white people, we need to change the rules because they're all considered to be racist until everybody has the same outcome, and that is equity. When you start talking about equity or equality of outcome, essentially socialism, communism, from each according to its abilities, to each according to his needs, that's what I think somebody on the right would be talking about when they call something woke or they call an attitude to be woke. If you're talking about equality under the law, hell, that's what the Constitution is about. That is the basic American premise. That's what we have been striving for and fighting for through all the eras of slavery and segregation and Jim Crow, to get past that. So the law really is equal for all people, that everybody has equal protection and equal treatment under the law. That's a goal you're going to get everybody on the right, or a lot of people on the right, to agree to. That's a generally agreeable proposition. If you mean by true equality that we should strive for equality of opportunity, yeah, I think that's a fair value, and we should be talking about how to get there. But again, what do you mean when you say you believe in true equality for all people? And you're saying, well, if I'm woke, I believe in true equality. Okay, what kind of equality?
Yeah, Matthew, I'll let you kind of jump in here. This one, to me, is the simple. This the shell game. They say equality, then they mean equity. They or they'll use them interchangeably, and they do have two separate meanings. To Eric's point, and again, I just think it's used as a hammer. I am not telling you there's not evil people out there. But I don't know of anybody that publicly is going to say, I really don't believe in equity or equality for all. I just don't believe in that. I don't want Matthew to be as happy as I am. And I'm not saying they're not out there. The other thing they do is they'll take one-offs of somebody doing something bad, either an education system or the policing of our population, whatever it is, and they go, that's a sign of something systemic. When in reality, it's also just a sign of human beings making mistakes or being evil in themselves, and not. It's just the fact that people are people. Now they don't do that the other way, but they do seem to pull these things out and go, well, that's an example of systematic whatever. And the problem with our country is we do have a history of that, so it's an easily believed thing, and it may be true, but going back, we don't have those nuanced conversations.
Yeah, if I find me a country that doesn't have oppression in its
Thank you.
background, I'm genuinely struggling to find an example in my own head. I don't think I'm going to succeed. Um, yeah, it is a shell game, and it is very important to ask people exactly what they mean by equality, by fairness in these cases. Um, Equity, the notion that you can get equal outcomes depending upon how you draw the group categories that you care about, um, doesn't even make sense to me in principle as something that we would actually want in the first place. In order to ensure that there's no differences in outcomes between groups, then I have to ensure that there's no differences between the groups in the first place. Once you control for treating people the same, irrespective of what groups they belong to,
I'm going to
if
step off. I'll be right back, guys. Keep going.
if sure, if you get equality before the law, if you get equality of opportunity, those two things are in place, and you're still getting differences in how groups in outcomes between groups, then that means that there's some differences in the groups that's accounting for those different outcomes. And do you really want to make those differences disappear? Is that good? What are the differences you're looking at, right? If the outcomes or if the opportunities are the same and the legal treatment is the same, that's all. That's the only thing that's left that can vary in your equation. So, do you really want to make all of these groups the same? What doesn't that make these groups less interesting in many ways? Do I want to make Indian Americans spend more time on basketball and less time on math and science? Does that help? Um, by making them different, and that's really ultimately one of the only ways that you can create these equal outcomes. Either that, or you just start. Well, you use affirmative action, frankly, to cut certain groups off at the knees so that they're cut down to size to create equal outcomes to other groups. That's the easiest way to do it.
Isn't it? It's Kurt Vonnegut that has the short story that was written about 50 years ago, where
Harrison
this
Bergeron, yeah,
where the smarter people had implants put in their ears that every few seconds a dong would go off, so they couldn't concentrate
yep,
for any length of time. And the smarter where you were, the more frequently the dong. If you were big and strong, you had to carry weights around so that everybody could be equal, everybody down to the lowest common denominator. And that's, if that's what you mean by equality for all people, then we have a problem. Then we're going to disagree. The problem is if you're saying your value is, you really value true equality for all people, and you mean equality under the law, equality of opportunity, then you're not woke. You're just, those are kind of normal values. If you mean equity, equality of outcome, then you're talking about socialism, communism, and you fall under woke. I think it's very interesting that somebody who says, once, I'm going to keep repeating this because it's such a theme throughout this. Well, this means I'm woke because I believe in true equality for all people, but they don't define equality. that tells me that the wokeness real definition of equality meaning equity is just not selling. I'm gonna take the next two in combination because I've got one consistent point for these. The next two, number 6 and 7, you like to share and you embrace cooperation. As standalone values, I think most people would agree. Sharing is caring. You learn as a little kid, share your toys. That you learn to embrace cooperation. Working with a group of people is usually better. 3 minds is better than 2. 2 minds is better than 1. That kind of stuff. So embracing cooperation and you like to share are things that are normal values. Those are not necessarily woke values. The difference is, and once again, where the game gets played is uh, do you mean voluntary sharing and voluntary cooperation? Or do you mean involuntary sharing and involuntary cooperation? If you are forced to share what you own, that's not really sharing. You're giving up your property rights. You're having stuff taken from you. If the government takes away your money to give to somebody else because of they're redistributing it to have an equality of outcome or to pay for more of a social safety welfare net, the more that happens, the less you have for yourself, for your own family, to put your own kids through school, all that kind of stuff. More importantly, though, that's not sharing. That is force. That is being taken from you. So if you believe that rich people should pay more taxes, you're not asking for sharing. You're asking for the power of the government to be used to redistribute wealth. If you are saying that people should work together more generally, sure, that's fine. We can cooperate. If you're saying that the government needs to force people to behave in a certain way for society's sake because it's an outcome you desire, then that's not cooperation. That's forced behavior. That's not what's supposed to happen in a free society. So if you believe in forced sharing and forced cooperation, that might be really woke, but that's not explained in here. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I think one of these big distinctions we see fought over and over again. Well, what would Jesus do? Well, Jesus would share. He would tell us to share, but he wouldn't tell us that the government should come in and force us to share. You're not a good Christian because you pay higher taxes. You're a good Christian if you donate to the poor. There's a difference between donating and having to pay higher taxes. And one of my kind of criticisms of the left over time has been people say, well, I believe in giving to other people and see why I'm living up to my values by doing this. So the biggest thing is we need to vote for people who are going to raise taxes to give away more money. It's not sharing when you're giving someone else's money away. That's a different thing. So liking to share and embracing cooperation, very simply, if those are voluntary, those are shared values about everybody. If you want to force other people to do that, then maybe that does make you woke. But here again, I'm going to keep making the same point. Somebody who's defending wokeness from the left doesn't take the time to define this well to tell us whether they mean this to be voluntary or mandatory.
Yeah, I came in on the tail end. I'll add mine. Everything you guys said is correct. If it's Ben Shapiro says this all the time about taxes. If you can enforce it with the end of a gun or jail time, then it's not voluntary. Then it's not sharing. It's I'm having to give this money. And use they. I love it when they bring up Jesus. Yeah, he would share, and he encouraged Christians to share, but he didn't come. If he could make us do things, if you're a Christian and believe in the story of Jesus, he came and died for us, so he gave us what? A choice. We have the option to follow, to not follow, to give, to not give, to be a good person, bad person, whatever it is. And if you're not a Christian, you still have the same option. Am I going to be a good person or a bad person? Do you want me to give? And who do I give to? I might want to give to YCAP locally, and I may not want to give to something else. Cooperation is the same way. By the way, there's a bunch of studies out there, and I hate to break some bubbles. Go look who gives more to charity, Republicans or Democrats. Look those stats up. I think some of my more liberal friends would be disappointed to find that Republicans, on the whole, at almost every income level, give more to charity than Democrats do. So there you go. And I've got a survey I can send everybody if they want to look at it.
Yeah, and to be a bit self-critical here as well, religious people tend to also be to give more to charity than secular folks as well. So yeah, there's now. I want to push back. I don't even know if I'm pushing back. I'm just curious what you guys think. One of the injunctions in the New Testament is also render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's.
Yeah.
So I can see that being a little bit of a pushback, saying, "Hey, look, even, even within the Christian tradition, there is the moral injunction that you need to be providing to or what is required by the government.
Right.
So why would you be opposed to, if the government is saying you need to pay taxes, or you need to obey these laws? Um, what is your moral objection to that, when what we're saying aligns perfectly well with what Jesus said?
Render
Eric, you want to
unto,
go with that or me?
I'll try first. Render unto
Yep.
Caesar what is Caesar's, unto God what is God's. It's an acknowledgement that when you're here on earth and there's a civil authority, that they have the civil right to tax, and you should have to pay those taxes. It doesn't mean, though, that Jesus was in favor of the Roman occupation. I don't think he was in favor of the policies of the Roman government. And where you look in a free society like we have today, or at least we're trying to have a free society as a constitutional republic, that the right of the citizens to say we shouldn't have to pay more in taxes than the government really needs to run itself. But there needs to be, like, there obviously needs to be some taxes. We got to pay for a national defense. We have to pay the president's salary. We have to pay for for the basic things that are necessary to run the government. That would be a conservative point of view that would be perfectly in line with still rendering unto Caesar what is Caesar. You might have a different point of view where politically we disagree, and you might be, well, I think we should have Social Security. I think we should have Social Security disability. I think we should have food stamps. I think we should have all these other things in a social welfare net. That's a fair debate in a free society of whether the role of government is to protect individual liberty, or is the role of government to provide for the common good, and where do you fall on that spectrum in between? But it doesn't mean that one end of that spectrum is more correct, that Jesus would have agreed with the common good form of government versus the individual rights form of government. It doesn't answer that question.
Okay. Very quickly. First of all, I thank God when we get to heaven, if there is a God, because I know Matthew and I, we disagree on some of this, which is completely fine. I like the fact that you and I disagree on some stuff. But I think we're all going to be surprised how disappointed he is that we've just given up common sense and just started going, well, you said give, so I gave it all to the government. He's gonna be like, that's not what I meant. Or like, you didn't give anything to the government. And he's gonna be like, that's not what I meant either. I gave you a brain too, people. Where's the biggest miracle is your brain, and you folks decided to stop using it.
And he made you pretty, Clint.
Yeah, absolutely, he did. He's going to be disappointed what I did with that too. But the other side of it is, as a Christian, I like having a government. And again, you're supposed to keep them separate. But I think when you give people options and freedom, that's as close to a religion as you can get, up to a point of it starts feeding on itself, right? I want Matthew to have as many options and freedom for his family as possible, but we can't have 342 million different options and choices so everybody can live in their own world. Then it's going to be impossible to have a society, and it's a broken world. If people are going to use the Bible as their stalwart against this, it is a broken world, which means we do things in a flawed way. There are no perfect systems. And so the last thing I will say is, one of the reasons I think, Matthew, to your point, that church, Christians give, or believers give a little more maybe, is because we're told to tithe to the church, give God what is God, right? But here's my issue on this. Do we as Christians, or just society, believe God needs our money? Joe Smith, my friend, says this forever. He's a pastor and started YCAP. Mission takes money. Unfortunately, that's what happens. So God doesn't, in my opinion, God does not ask us to give money because God needs the money. He asks us because that helps us stay in alignment with our heart to give to the community around us. And then he trusts the church to go and feed our people around the neighborhoods, to go and give back to those who need to help pay with the light bill. That's what the church was initially supposed to do. Go reach out and take care of that little footprint around them. And how did they do that? The people that lived in the East Ridge community gave to their church, and then the church did what they could for the community. So there's a big difference between me voluntarily giving my money so I know I can be part of also how it's used, than giving my money to a government that's going to go hijack it and blackmail Florida. If they don't do what they're supposed to do, you don't get the money. Or if you don't get the vaccine, you don't get this money that you've already given the government. I think it's a broken world, and we're making broken decisions trying to do the best we can.
I think Eric, you spoke to something that Clint just said earlier, where you said, are you motivated internally to share and to cooperate, or are you being coerced into sharing or cooperating? Would it, I'll temporarily sort of work within the Christian tradition here, and one of the common arguments is, would God see it as legitimate if you followed the rules because you were just afraid of being punished, versus if you did if you shared, if you cooperated, if you loved your neighbor because you were internally motivated for doing those things because you recognize them as the right thing to do?
Mhm.
Which would God recognize as being a better development of the moral spirit? I think
I
it would be the latter.
I agree. However, and again, we can spend a little extra time on this one. That's a good conversation. But I'll just say this: but there are things in religion, in Christianity, in jujitsu, in your job that you do out of obligation. It's not supposed to be easy to be insert something that requires me to be disciplined here. It's not supposed to be easy to become a black belt or to become an attorney. Holy crap. If what Eric has gone through to become who he is, he loves what he does. Does that mean that every step along the way, Eric has just been passionate about the next thing I have to do? Sometimes Christianity requires us to do things that are counterintuitive, sacrificial, and we may not want to. Given the $100, that's why the story of the lady that gave her the only shingle she had is such a big deal. She did it. I'm sure she had a good heart. I hope she had a good heart, but she did it. And that's what mattered. Pardon my rant there for a second.
Apologies for taking things in perhaps too far of another direction,
I,
but
I don't think I think this is why people listen to podcasts. This
yeah,
is exactly what I'm serious. This is exactly the kind of conversations that happen in the real world.
yeah,
So I,
sure
I
does.
just think sometimes we get stuck in that, and it's not supposed to be easy to give to other people. So I
No.
love the fact that they think sharing and cooperation, but I also think what Eric said is dead on. Once you make me do it, it stops being my choice.
Mm.
All right, Eric, wrap this one up and go to the
Yeah.
next
So
topic.
the last one other answer to Matthew about that biblical quote and how that's been used and argued over is that there are people in the of Christian beliefs who also just point out that one fair interpretation, at least they argue, of what Jesus was saying was those rules and things that you have to follow that come from me and come from my Father that have been written down in the Ten Commandments in the Old Testament and their traditions. You have to follow those rules between you and God.
Mhm.
If the government has certain rules, that's between you and the government, and those are not my problem. Render unto Caesar what is Caesar, and God's what is God's. All I'm over here dealing with what God wants you to do, what Caesar wants you to do, and deal with your life and civil authority on earth before you reach your ultimate salvation. That's just something you have to put up with. That's another argument that they would say. It is not, they would argue, to be interpreted that Jesus is saying that you should pay higher taxes. And so I think there's some point to that. Let's we have three left, and I don't
Yep.
want to keep us here all day. The other one, this one fascinates me. You respect others' rights without defining which rights that they respect. Somebody who I would suggest is a right-leaning person that demonstrates modern woke tendencies. We have heard lately that speech is violence and that even silence is violence. And if you don't agree with those things, you are a racist and you are a bigot. So the right to free speech is, I think, something. If you're saying you respect other rights, you're going to respect my right to free speech just like I respect yours. That's a traditional Western liberal value. Uh, but this 10 symptoms of the woke mind doesn't define which rights that they're saying they respect. So I kind of wonder about, would they include free speech in there if they're really truly a modern person who would be accused of being woke. There's been a lot of talk that they don't believe in free speech, and that you don't give a platform to people that you disagree with. What about the right to own a firearm? Is that a right that we all agree that you would respect? What about my right to have a big SUV that guzzles a lot of gas in this modern climate? Does that a right that you would respect? What rights are you talking about? So once again, it's a vague platitude. It generally is something we can all agree with. It also entirely misses the point of the conversation about the woke culture being anti traditional rights in America, like free speech, gun ownership, the right to be protected by the police, therefore defunding the police, yeah, all that kind of stuff.
Matthew, do you still have a few more minutes for us, sir? I know you're
I do.
busy. Okay,
I do.
go. You want to jump in on this one before I do,
Yeah.
or do you want me to go first?
It's just an unhelpful thing. Others' rights, which ones? Um, and unfortunately, a lot of supposed rights, like the right to not be offended, is have arisen within certain factions of the far left, the woke left specifically, and they might refer to that as a right, and I disagree. And but does my disagreement mean that I don't respect their rights? Well, I've certainly had that implied, if not directly stated, multiple times before in conversations, at least online. Um, so yeah, it's a big question mark there. Um, which ones, and what exactly does respecting it mean to you? Does disagreement equal disrespect in your mind as a woke person? Um, so yeah, I I don't know what that statement actually even means.
I don't either. And to be honest, we've been focusing on what rights. I would back up and I would say who others, because in my world, who would bring the rights with them? In other words, do you believe in the rights of those who control Iran? How about China? How about Russia? How about Venezuela right now? How about Christians that believe in traditional marriage values? How about the person that doesn't want to bake the cake? How about the right? Let me see what else I wrote down here. Yeah. How about all of those rights? How about all the things that you disagree with, and maybe we all could disagree with, but where do you draw the line on only what rights, but whose rights? And I think, Matthew, you made the best point, or one of the best points is, once we say yes to all or no to all, what does respect mean? Again, defining these terms, this is such a shake in the rattle. I'm more moral than you are to post stuff like this, because then all of a sudden, if I say, hey, what does respect mean? Whose rights are we defending, and what are those rights? If you go back up to it, remember, you got to understand there's no issues are black and white. Most issues aren't black and white. Oh, okay. So then we're going to have some pretty hard conversations, especially when we have to put in policies around this stuff. This is not this is a poster I would expect on a church wall. This is a church wall poster that you can go to training union on Sunday night that will fill in the gaps of what this means to be a Baptist. That's exactly what this poster is. I'm 55 years old, closer to 56. I grew up a Baptist. I am a Baptist. I know what happens when you put posters up on the wall. Hey, Wednesday nights, we're going to talk about these 6 traits. That's what this is right here, with no clarification behind it. There's no class coming up to help us understand it. Eric, I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. Let's move through this so we don't run out of time. We got 2 left. You believe culture and the arts have value is number 9. Once again, a hell of a platitude that almost everybody can agree with, but I think it's like number 6 and 7. You like to share and you embrace cooperation as long as it's voluntary.
Mm-hmm.
I believe in culture and arts have value, but it doesn't necessarily mean I agree that my tax dollars should be used to fund the most radical, crazy art ideas that somebody who can't make money as an artist wants to do, and so he's entitled or she's entitled to some kind of government funds to do their art. It's within the realm of reasonable disagreement whether or not we should, say, for example, fund National Public Radio or PBS, whether those should be government things or not government things. That's a reasonable area of disagreement. But to say I'm woke because I believe culture and arts have value and everybody else doesn't, that's not what we're talking about. With when you're woke, it's more likely you have to fund my culture and my arts, and if you don't, then you're an evil person. That would be the accusation from somebody on the right talking about that. Again, it's an ill-defined platitude, and again, I'll conclude with this. It's another example of, if you have to say this is what it means to be woke, this unspecific, that's something that generally everybody can agree to, it means you can't really defend those far left things that some people are putting out there.
Matthew, it's coming to you. I've got one response to this one. You believe culture and arts have value unless it's try that in this small town. Then all of a sudden, art and my culture has no value. Back to you, Matthew.
Yeah, and every single one of these are great examples of what's called the Mott and Bailey technique, where you have your real position that you're trying to defend, that's hard to defend, and then you have your easy position that you will retreat to when someone attacks the harder to defend position,
Mhm.
right? So that's like the outer area where that's harder to defend, where maybe you grow your crops in a town or something, right? That's what you really care about. But when you get attacked, you will retreat to the defensible position of, well, I just believe culture and the arts have value. And if you
Mhm.
disagree with me, then you obviously disagree that culture and the arts have value. Really? That must be what you're actually doing, rather than disagreeing about the details of how the principle is implemented. Right? If you don't like these books that we've added into the curriculum, that the ethnic studies curriculum, that must mean that you just don't want students learning about racism and the
Well,
history of slavery.
isn't that what Collie said when she was on with us? Funny is basically she was going against an African American professor who was pro basically CRT. She's
Mhm.
I've seen it, and that's basically what it is. If you don't like this, then you don't want people to learn about African American history or slavery or the evils of slavery. And it's almost that extreme argument I was talking about earlier. Oh, you're questioning me? Why do you hate black people?
Right.
Why are you homophobic? I'm not. I'm like, why are we talking about it in our seventh grade? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's deeply dishonest as a way of going about interaction with the world. One of the things that I did in my master's thesis was I brought people together of opposing positions, but in one of the conditions, as part of a prerequisite for their conversation, they each had to state their position, and then the other one had to summarize it to their satisfaction before they could even start talking about the topic. And it was on the topic of immigration. And people can do it.
That's a
They really
stupid
can.
idea. I don't
Like,
like that at all.
it's possible.
No, it's a good idea. Braver Angels does that in some of their exercises too, to encourage those conversations. Um, I Mott and Bailey, I found an article on that. I meant to cover this earlier, but I think this is an important thing to point out. I love that this is a brief description of what a Mott and Bailey argument is. A Mott and Bailey tactic is dishonest. It advertises one thing that is easy to convince people to support, a Mott, but rarely contains much more that is harder to convince people of to support the Bailey, the underlying argument. The best example I can think of this is after George Floyd was killed. I had friends post on Facebook the idea that if you were walking down the street and you saw two white rednecks beating up a black guy and you just walked on by, then you weren't doing anything and you should help out. And that maybe made you a racist, or maybe it made you a racist for not wanting to help out. You had an obligation to go in there and stop the two white guys from beating up the black guy.
Okay.
And that's what anti-racism is. Except once
Hmm.
you start learning about anti-racism, you learn that it's not the obligation to just stop somebody from being beat up on the street, but it's a belief that every single time there's an inequitable outcome between black people and white people, there is a racist explanation for that. And you have to believe that, agree with that, and support the structural changes that would make it possible to always have an equal outcome. Otherwise, you're an anti-racist. Perfect example of Mott and Bailey. No one wants to see a black kid get beat up. We can all agree on that. Does everybody agree that every unfairness everywhere is racially motivated and we need to tear down society's structures down to the point of even getting rid of critical thinking and all the traditional Western values of science and everything else until we get to equity? No, that is not what we can all agree on. And that was a perfect example of a Mott and Bailey. So this 10 symptoms of the woke mind is the same thing. Let's hit the last one since we're running out of time, if you guys don't mind. And this one is basically the same thing. You care for the planet and all of its life. Yes, almost everybody cares for the planet. None of us wants to live on a post-apocalyptic pile of ash. We don't want to live in the world where Will Smith was in I Am Legend, or where name another post-apocalyptic movie. We don't want to live in those circumstances. We don't want to have global warming or global cooling or any of those things that get so bad that people start dying. We don't want to have more pollution. We don't want to necessarily hurt people. The question is, do you just ignore the scientific debate and ask and tell people you're not allowed to ask questions and simply go to the most extreme solutions to what is alleged to be the problems of the environment, to the point where we change our standard of living, the point where we actually cause people in poorer countries to start really becoming poor? In other words, are you willing to let children starve in order to put in solutions to the climate that aren't going to change anything? What do you actually believe about is going on with the planet? What do you believe about pollution, and how much, and what are the solutions that you're proposing? Those are the real questions that we should have a fair debate about. It's an incredibly oversimplistic, vague statement. You care for the planet all its life. Yeah, everybody does. What woke people do, though, if you're from the right and you're accusing someone of being woke, is what a woke person would say is, if you disagree with climate change, then you are the problem and you want the earth to burn. If you disagree with our solution to make every car electric and to reduce our standard of living to essentially early 1800s standard of living, then you want the climate to, you want the planet to burn, and you hate people and you hate the planet and you're an evil person.
Yeah, mine's real simple on this one. Me and Jeff Stiles talk about this all the time. If you ask any conservative I know, they will tell you that we living on this planet impact the planet. But that's the whole thing. How we interact with biology and nature. That's wolves do it, cows do it, plants do it, water does it. We all interact and affect it. Now we can affect it more, and I understand that. Here's the issue I have, Matthew. Then it's coming to you. There are cities under the ocean. There are seashells in the desert. There's continents that used to be pushed together that aren't anymore. So my response on this has always been, the climate and the weather has always changed. That's why we don't have the dinosaurs anymore. There was something that nature did that changed immediately life. And to see these underwater cities and shales and deserts and all of these things that have changed over time, the question should be not are just are how what are not just that are we impacting it, what to degree, how can we fix it, how can we adapt? Because I think it's more like we're riding a bull and we have to adjust where we're at in the saddle, because Mother Nature is going to change either with our input or without it. Wait till the volcano goes up, and then everybody go, oh, well, we really weren't impacting it near as much as Mother Nature can. And so we have to approach this as we're part of nature. We are biological creatures, and we can impact it in a negative way, but to what extent and how can we fix it? Matthew?
One of the examples that Bjorn Lomborg uses in his book False Alarm is in terms of doing a cost benefit analysis of, okay, we've established there's an issue, what are our different policy options? He gives us the example of the number of people who die in the United States every year of motor traffic crashes, right? That number, according to the National Highway Safety Administration for 2022, was 42,795 people who died in 1 year. Now, there are a lot of different policy interventions that we could implement if we care about preventing those deaths, right? And of course, we know the maxim now. If it saves just one life, we need to do it, right? Now, we could, perhaps the most effective way of reducing that massive number of deaths is we could reduce the speed limit to 3 miles per hour. Why aren't we doing that?
Because road rage death would then overtake all highway deaths ever. Sorry,
it would
continue
take you, 5 hours to get to work in the morning. But yeah, it would reduce the number of the number of highway deaths and vehicle deaths dramatically, but we don't do it. Why don't we do it? Is it because, if I'm to use the woke approach, you just hate people on the highway and you want them to die? No, it's because we've considered the negative consequences of having a 3 mile per hour speed limit and how it would affect our lives, and we don't want to make that sacrifice, even to save 42,795 lives every year. Does that mean that you don't care about those lives? Right? No, it means that people are making a cost benefit analysis of their own when they consider that, and
Mhm.
they've decided that it's worth all of those lives to be able to maintain, their way of life. So why don't we take that same approach when it comes to environmental preservation? The and there's a lot of sort of weird contradictions in this conversation where the people who are genuinely the most tuned into these cost benefit analyses are the people that frankly the left would least expect to be. The group that is most focused on the conservation of the deer population in where my wife grew up in rural
Hunters.
Pennsylvania is hunters. Yeah,
Hunters. Yeah, fishermen.
the very
Absolutely.
people that are killing, right, that are responsible for killing the members of that population are the ones that are most concerned with making sure that it continues.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of nuance and complexity. Not all issues are black and white. That we could absolutely include in this conversation that we're not,
Right.
because they want to treat it as, again, this is the simple, easy to defend area.
Well, yeah, it's the moral signaling. And Eric, I'll let you wrap it up. I do want to say one thing about the walking down the street and seeing a fight. That is the who's telling the story. If you're showing the last 30 seconds of the video where somebody's getting beat up, but they don't show the first 30 seconds where he started punching the other person first, or hey, did you see that guy walk? If I were to tell Eric Buchanan right now, hey, there was this fight between two white guys who were beating up a black guy, and a guy just walked right by, I could make a headline right now and get on Dr. Phil's show. However, if I also said, oh, and by the way, that guy was blind, all of a sudden, if you that changes the story. That's that nuanced conversation that we just want the headline. Man walks by people beating somebody out of racism. Well, that man had an obligation. We don't know the story of that man or that girl that walked by or why. I know this. Once you get tried for murder, when you do stand up on a subway in New York, it really does not incentivize people to stand up and do the right thing anymore. All right, Eric, wrap this one up for us, buddy.
So let me finish this up, and don't forget, we got a recommendation today. I've got a quick one that's related to this. When it comes to you respect the environment, I'm looking forward to a conversation I hope we'll have next time or another upcoming show where we talk about some of the fights over climate science and how people are supposed to look into that. There are plenty of resources out there if you do a little research about what are some of the previous predictions that we've gone through. And I just want to kind of hit a few, and there's literally dozens of those. That in 1969 they were predicting we'd have so much global warming that the oceans would actually turn to steam by 1989. But in 1970, the scientists were predicting we would have an ice age by the year 2000. That in 1970 they were also predicting that we would have water rationing by 1974 and food rationing by 1980. That in 1974 that satellite imaging was starting to be used for climate projections, and it was showing a trend toward global cooling and a new ice age. At the same time, it also started to show that we were losing ozone in the atmosphere to the extent that it was going to dramatically change the environment. In 1980, the prediction was that acid rain would kill all the life in lakes, that we would lose all the plants. In 1988, they predicted by 2018, 5 years ago, the Maldive Islands would be underwater because of either global or global cooling, depending on which way the ice melted and what it did to the actual level of the ocean. They were fighting over that too. By the year 2000, children in the world wouldn't know what snow is because it wouldn't snow anymore. And it keeps going on and on and on. I've got dozens of these examples.
Al Gore made quite a few of those.
In fact, that in 2008, he said we would have no ice in the Arctic by the year 2013.
Yeah.
That was an Al Gore prediction. So add that to the list. So in terms of future predictions, let me just skip, if you guys don't mind. We've talked about these 10 tropes, the mots that were put up by the person. I'm woke and here's my mots, and we don't actually talk about the Baileys. There's a movie I would like more people to be familiar with. It's a movie called Americathon, and it came out in 1979, and it's set in 1998. And the premise is that America is so broke that paper money is worthless. You have to use gold coins and vending machines, that nobody has gasoline anymore. Everybody walks to work. And Matthew, this is what you made me think of when you said 3 miles an hour to get to work. The opening scene of Americathon essentially shows people riding their bicycles and skateboards and hiking down the interstate in Los Angeles to get to work. And it's still really crowded. It's like LA rush hour, except no cars. People are living in their cars, sort of reminiscent of what's that other movie where the cars are stacked up and the cool things are happening in the
Ready Player One.
yeah, Ready Player One. So it's similar to that, except each car has its own nice little garden, and it looks like a mobile home park made with cars. Anyway, it's got John Ritter in it. John Ritter plays the president. He's kind of a Jerry Moonbeam Brown character. They're wearing track suits with a vest in order to look presidential. It also has Harvey Korman in it. It has Jay Leno in it. And it's just a great movie of predicting how, from the 1979 point of view, if things keep trending the way they are, how bad they're going to get. That's the kind of humor that we need to approach some of the dire predictions that are coming today. That this is what they made fun of back then. If you get a chance, it's a movie we should all be familiar with.
Okay, here we go. We got recommendations. I'm going to go ahead and tell you my predictions real quick. Go check out the being stuck in traffic. You're talking about walking to work is Falling Down. Does anybody remember Falling Down with Michael Douglas? Okay, that's kind of. I'm just saying that. And then Escape from New York. And my prediction is eventually we're going to just wall off a couple of these cities, and that's where we're going to start sending people and saying good luck getting out. Then everybody will want to build walls. But now let's go to predictions. I mean, not predictions, but recommendations. I've got mine very quickly, but Eric, you go, or Matthew, one of y'all go
Mine
first.
was the movie Americathon.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
Matthew?
Actually, I'm going to recommend a book that I just referred to, which is Bjorn Lomborg's book titled False Alarm. And I'll get the subtitle here real quick. Hold on. How climate change panic costs us trillions, hurts the poor, and fails to fix the planet. I'm only a few chapters in, maybe 5 chapters or so. And it's very readable. It's well cited, very, very useful as sort of an introduction to a lot of the well-supported critiques of climate alarmism.
Mine is Crimecast. I do with David Roddy, former Chattanooga police chief. I just did one about Jimmy Hoffa, the trial that took down an icon. The author was Mari Nicely, and it should be a Netflix series. It is a fantastic book. It's a great podcast. And then my last one is everybody should go see Sound of Freedom. I went with a really good friend of mine this weekend to see Sound of Freedom, and it was a good movie. It was the best crappy movie. One of the best crappy movies I've ever seen.
You didn't go see Barbie?
I was going to say.
No, I'm going to go see that later. It's funny to hear all of the feedback about all the sexual gender and how bad men are from toys that were made with no genitalia at all. They were completely, ambiguous. And now all of a sudden they're arguing about, I'm like, you can't use anything. What are y'all doing? It's a stupid thing. But anyway, what are we doing?
But it's Margot Robbie.
I don't give a flying rat's ass who it is. I'm so tired of that crap. Anyway, who wants to wrap it up? Somebody give us something of wisdom of wise folks to say right now. Somebody, go. Say something.
Let me conclude my part with this. So last week I was in Philadelphia, the original capital of the United States, where the Declaration of Independence was written. The building where it was written is still standing. Liberty Hall, where the Declaration was adopted, and also later the Constitution was adopted. I toured the American Revolution Museum. I toured some of the other historical stuff. There's a Liberty Bell. There's a Constitution Center. The lines were long. There were plenty of people there that were excited about American history. The city is a great place to visit to see a lot of American history. It's more than a day's worth if you're going to take a teenager and learn something about American history. And I didn't see a lot of there weren't any protests against it. There was one thing I saw spray painted on a sidewalk that had been related back to the Moms for Liberty having been in town recently, but I didn't see a lot of left-leaning protesters protesting stuff at the Liberty Bell or anything like that. Yeah. It was kind of traditional American summer. Let's go see American history stuff.
Yeah, I've been to Philadelphia. It's a great city. I want to tell you where Eric was doing that. I went and ate at the Waffle House in East Ridge again, where is the site of some of the best fights, many fights that I've seen, some of the best ones I've ever seen over the last 30 years. That's what I was doing with my time while Eric was doing that. And
So
Matthew was,
you didn't actually see any fights this time?
no,
No.
but it's always like rolling the dice. It's like going to Vegas. You never know. You never know what you get when you go there. All right, Matthew Durham, you got crops to get and people to teach and stuff like that. Hey, I want to. Where are we on the attorney from Germany? I want to get him on with Eric. Is that still a possibility?
I have not heard back. I need to reach out again on that.
Yeah.
Kind of fizzled on their side, sadly. But
Yeah.
yeah, let me see if I can make another attempt.
Because Eric's going to bring free speech badassery. That's why it's fizzled, by golly. I'm just kidding. Maybe not. Maybe not. All right. Bye, everybody.
Take care,
Good
folks.
seeing you guys.